here is the top mount bearing. It's still sort of like rotating freely, although you can see there is quite a play in this bearing, so I think it's definitely worth to change. And also the rubber here is deteriorating. It's kind of breaking around the metal element, and it's very rusty, so that will go. We start with removing a dust cap, and then we need to compress the spring. This is a potentially very hazardous job, so please take extra care and make sure that whatever you do, you know what you're doing, and you look after yourself. It is important to look after the tools, so here we apply some grease, and the spring compressors hopefully will work without much of a resistance. There are two big spring compressors that are being used. One is able to grab 3 coils, the other underneath only grabs 2 coils. The red spring compressors are quite loose, but they're just sort of like extra protection. They do not really compress the spring. It's important to make sure that top mount is free, there is no tension there. So we need to compress the spring to the point that you can move the top and the base without any tension. So it is important to test it, that there is no tension on the top plate or the top mount before we undo the screw on the shock absorber. Here it is. We're checking all is free, there's no tension, and then I'm going to use a special tool to undo the screw at the top of the shock absorber. This is 21mm socket and then I can feed through a hex key that will lock the shock absorber from rotating. There are 21mm spark plug sockets, so this can be purchased, and then a long hex key. If I remember correctly, the hex key is number 7. Here it is, and then we need to use some impact action to to undo the top screw. There's probably a little bit of corrosion there, but now it is coming off very easily. This tool is really good. It really helps to do this job quickly. So here is the nut securing the bearing. Then we can remove the bearing itself together with the mounting plate. At the bottom of the bearing there is a bearing cover, and then there is a washer and a base for the spring. Here is the bearing cover, protects the grease from leaking out through the bottom of the bearing, and here is a top mount for the spring. Top plate for the spring has a rubber and the plate itself, and these are all elements. So this is top spring mount. All the loose corrosion has been removed. I'm not going to paint it. I think it's probably useless. Sooner or later the whole strut will need replacing. What I'm going to do, I'm going to put some rust converter on it and basically leave it like that. This is cleaned from the rust. And here is the rust converter. You can use any rust converter. I'm using a nitro Morse. It is milk-like substance that turns blue in contact with rust and eventually changes color to black. It also creates a little bit of a finish on top. But it's not going to last. If you really want to protect the rust converting effect, then needs some top coat. You can use any paint that can be directly applied to rust on top of of this rust converter. It actually gives a reasonably nice effect. I'm not sure how long it's going to last. I suspect it's going to last long enough for the shock absorber to be renewed at some point. Here to help the spring to find its position, I put some silicone Teflon spray. I don't think really it is needed, but I thought it's going to help a little bit rotate the spring into its position. So on the rubber elements at the bottom of the base plate for the spring, on the shock absorber, and on the top mount plate for the spring, on the rubber. That's where I'm using the silicone Teflon spray. This is the protection for the shock absorber. And this is the rubber for the top of the spring. It is important to make sure that the spring sits in its place correctly, and its orientation of the spring is correct. So once again, there is rubber on top of the spring, then this metal element that holds the spring in place, then there is a washer on top of this metal element, and then the bearing. So here is a new bearing. It's Fabi Bilstein. It's worth to make sure there's plenty of grease in the bearing, and here is a bearing cover, lower bearing cover, and then it goes on top of the shock absorber, and then finally a nut. It needs to be a new nut. And then basically I'm going to use exactly the same tool to tighten the screw. Initially it is enough to do it without this hex key in the shock absorber. But eventually you need to use this key to prevent the piston, shock absorber piston, from rotating, to tighten it to the appropriate torque. And the correct torque value is 64 Newton meters. Obviously the thread and the nut needs to be new, and the thread needs to be dry. If we sprayed anything or lubricated anything before, then it needs to be dry and clean, because only then the correct torque values are obtained. Yeah, that is nice and tight. And the next step is to use a torque wrench to check. This is a little bit tricky. I had to get the supported strut a little bit higher, because otherwise I couldn't get this wrench. I'm using both digital and analog readings here, so I have a additional torque indicator, digital torque indicator, and here it is. I'm actually torquing the this hex key, not necessarily the nut. That should be the correct one. You have a crow foot adapter for the torque wrench, then you could probably do the nut. I didn't have it, so that's why I torqued the the hex key. And now we need to remove the spring compressors and all is done. Top bearing is correctly installed and replaced.